And while the board secretary calls the roll, can we see that all cell phones are on silent, please? Can you call the roll, Mary Ann?
Here.
Ms. Ruska?
Here.
Mr. Jepson?
Here.
Dr. King?
Yes.
Mr. Cindy?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Yes.
Mr. Welch?
Here. Okay, a quorum has been established. Quorum being present, the first order of business is to hold a public hearing to receive public comments on the proposal to sell $7,800,000 school fire prevention and safety bonds for the purpose of conforming the existing facilities of the district that house students to the building code proclamated by the State Board of Education of the State of Illinois by altering and reconstructing said facilities and having equipment purchased and installed therein. Due notice has been given of this public hearing and all other statutory requirements preliminary to holding of such public hearing has been complied with. The discussion is now open, and Dr. Skinkis will present the information on the proposed issuance of the bonds.
In the board packet on page 9 through roughly 40, it actually goes to 55, is the life safety survey that was completed and approved by the board in October of 2013. That happens every 10 years in the state of Illinois under the Illinois School Code. And items that are life safety items are identified and classified as either A, Bs, or Cs. A's have approximately 1 year to get completed, B's 5 years, and C's, it's preferred that they get completed during the 10-year period but not required. So roughly, we have about $7.8 million in life safety items that need to be addressed by the Board of Education before the summer of 2019. Some of those are being addressed during our current project, and then the others are future items. And so one of the formalities is when you submit your life safety survey study and the Board of Education approves it, there's not a dollar amount attached to it. The architect will put in projected estimates, but the state doesn't want to see a total dollar amount or formal dollar amount because as long as you're not using life safety funds or life safety bonds to pay for it, that's not an issue with them. Once the Board of Education wants to consider using life safety funds, then you have to conduct a hearing as well as submit amendments. And so we approved Amendment 19 last week, which were some of the life safety items that dealt with our current project. This week we'll be submitting Amendment 20. I did find out that the amendments are ongoing from previous life safety studies. That's why the first one we approved was 19. And then this one that we're going to be set to recommend for approval tonight is number 20. But more of this, by conducting this hearing, this is a formal step. That's a requirement. It does not commit the board to having to take out bonds or use life safety funds. It's just an opportunity to cover our options and to allow for public comment.
And with that, we'll have a presentation from William Blair, and we have Liz Hennessy here to present. Would you just come up and introduce yourself again? I think most of us know you.
Pass out these books.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you, Liz.
Good evening. Thank you for having me tonight. I'm Elizabeth Hennessy with William Blair. I work in our public finance department, and I'm here to talk about your options with regard to life safety bonds. So the first section looks at our market overview, and interest rates have stayed very low over the last several years, starting to go up in the last 2 weeks, but we've got volatility as we have throughout the year. We're still in a low interest rate environment. Page 1 shows rates from May of 2010 through March of 2015 for the 20-year AAA rated municipal market data index and the green line is the 10-year AAA index. Page 2 looks at the yield curve, showing interest rates all along over the years. So we start with year 1 and go through year 30. The green line is where we are now, and the blue line shows kind of one of our lowest points in time in 2013. So you see our green line is not too far above that, so we're still within some of the lowest interest rates. This also tells us that the very lowest interest rates are on the short end of the yield curve. So, you know, when you do investments, you certainly realize that.
Okay, I want you to explain this a little bit to the public,
Okay?
and even for my
Sure.
refresh my knowledge here. So, the first graph you just had, that was like national, municipal.
Yes. There's a couple indexes that are indicators, kind of like the 10-year Treasury bond, of where municipal bond rates are. And
It's basically tax-free or federal
yes,
tax-free?
tax exempt.
Okay.
So on page 1, that blue line is the AAA-rated municipal market data index for bonds that have an average repayment of 20 years. Okay, and then the green line is for an average repayment of 10 years. Now, this index is made up of AAA-rated large state issuers that are tracked on a daily basis. So this index is renewed each day, and this kind of gives you a summary of where it's been over the last 5 years.
And we issued our original bonds back when? 2008, that's not on this graph, right?
It's not on this graph. Yeah, you issued bonds in 2008, and then prior to that, you issued bonds in 2006 and 2007 pursuant to referendum, and I'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
Okay? Any questions on page 2, that yield curve?
How does that differ from the first one?
Well, this shows, as opposed to an interest rate average for a 10-year and a 20-year bond, this shows the rates on each point of the time continuum from year 0 all the way to year 30. So if you're on the green line, let's say, which is representative of this year's or today's yields as of May 1st, and you go out to year 30, that tells you is what you would expect to get in terms of a yield on a 30-year AAA-rated municipal bond. And if you kind of draw a line over to the y-axis, you see it's right around 3%. Versus if you owned a bond with a maturity of only 5 years, and you went up to where that green line is, you see your rate of return would be under 1.5%. So the moral of the story here is that the longer you take to pay off bonds, the higher your interest rate's going to be. The shorter your repayment, the lower the interest rate's going to be.
So it should have said years of maturity in the x-axis on this.
Yes, it's the years to maturity.
What, how come it says past 7, but the dates, periods of past 7 years, is there a reason?
It just goes back to 2008. It's just looking at 7 different data points.
Okay, so is there a reason we skipped 11 and 9, or just that's the way it came out?
That's
Okay.
just to give you a longer period of time. Okay. So let's go to page 3 then, and we look at your 2 outstanding bonds. You mentioned the 2008s have been paid off a year or so ago, 2013. The outstanding bonds are the 2007B and the 2006A bonds. Each of those bonds were issued pursuant to a referendum for building projects. And the orange highlighted maturities are the ones that are callable prior to maturity. Okay? So you look at the interest rates or the coupons on those bonds. On the 2007Bs, they're range from 4% to 4.75. And on the 2006As, they're all at about 5%. So the district has the opportunity to refund those bonds for savings. Now you can refund them before the call date or at the call date. You get better savings when you refund them closer to the call date. So we just want to be careful about that analysis.
So to go on with what John asked, so people understand, if we look at the 2006A to 2016, it says they're 100%. The earliest call says it's 100% at 12/1/2015.
Right, so coming right up, December 1, 2015, these bonds are callable at par. So that means there's no prepayment penalty.
And we can call everything in the orange, not just the
Everything in the
maturity in
orange.
that year, or that's?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So when we get into this presentation a little bit, I'm going to show you what the savings are for doing that at current interest rates. So if we just refunded those bonds and put them back into the same maturities, not shortening it up or stretching it out, what the savings would be.
Okay.
You have similar opportunity for the 2007 B bonds, however, not now. And the reason not now is because the bonds are not callable till December 1 of 2017. Okay? So we could advance refund them now, but we'd have to set up an account at a bank to invest the proceeds until the call date. And there's a cost to that that hurts the savings on these bonds. So it's to your advantage to wait till we get closer to that call date, even though we have to balance that with the risk that interest rates would go up somewhat.
Is that the negative arbitrage conversation we had approximately 18 months ago?
It is indeed, yes.
And then 2006A and 2006B, that does not mean a rating, it's just showing, it's just a number, or what is?
Well, it's the series.
Okay.
So there might have been another part of 2007A or something that has been paid off already.
So is this analogous to refinancing your house at a lower interest rate, and you reap the savings by doing that?
Yes.
Okay.
Mhm.
So I think many of our stakeholders, families, have refinanced when interest rates dropped, and if you keep the same period of time left on your mortgage, you do save money over the long haul. I think that's something that we all understand pretty well.
Right. Then let's move to page 4. This is the statutory debt limit. So school districts can have principal amount of bonds outstanding up to 6.9% of the most recently known equalized assessed valuation. And right now, the 2013 is the most recently known number, $764,981,743 times the 6.9% results in a gross debt limit of $52,783,000. And you have outstanding principal of $42,425,000, leaving you a net debt limit of $10,358,000.
And that 52,783,000 is 207A, and that, if you add those two bonds up there, would that be that?
That would be the $42,425,000, yeah,
Okay.
the principal amount, not the interest.
Gotcha.
Okay. Okay, page 5 talks about non-referendum limited bonds, and the tax limitation law, which limits the amount of taxes you can extend for both your operating funds, it also applies to bonds that are issued without referendum, okay? So the district can issue bonds without referendum up to $1,744,672 payment per year. So what the tax cap said was for districts that had bonds out in the levy year 1994, had principal and interest payments in that year, you could continue to issue bonds as long as those payments for those non-referendum bonds did not exceed that levy. Okay, so that's the authority that was used in the 2008 issuance. In 2009, they applied a CPI factor to that debt service extension base number. So currently, in levy year 2015,
Your debt service extension base is this $1,744,672. Okay? So that's the amount you can pay off each year.
Why don't you explain that again, because it didn't say that in here, and that was a pretty complicated explanation.
Okay, and I'll go to a chart as well. Maybe if we go to page 6 and look at this chart. So if you see, starting from the left, we've got the EAV. Hard to know what EAV is going to do in the future, so we've assumed 0 increase. The debt service extension base, you can see for levy year 13, was $1,705,247. And then in 2014, it went up by 1.5%, which is our CPI for 2014. And then for 2015, we know the CPI is going to be 0.8%. So it goes up to $1,744,672.
That part's easy to understand, I think. The part that was hard was the explanation how we got to the 1990 and what it was then and how we got to where we are
right.
now. So we
Well,
understand,
yeah.
it says it in there, once you've determined what that number is, it can go up by the CPI, which you put in the chart. But I don't understand
The
how you got to
origination
the
of that
first
number?
number, yes.
Well, I would have to get another chart back to you all, but I'd
Okay.
be happy to do so, because back in '94, you
Okay.
had some outstanding working cash or life safety bonds, okay? And at that point, you had a debt service levy of about $1,700,000, or just under $1,700,000,
Okay.
okay? So I can get you the composition of that levy, what bonds made up that levy, but that's what establishes your ability under the tax cap to issue bonds without referendum into the future.
Okay.
So when you say you had, the school had?
Youth District 208,
Okay.
yes,
And then
So the
that's,
school had a loan, or had debt that totaled that amount?
right.
Okay.
that was the payment for the
payment.
debt.
The payment
Not
of
the debt.
Principal and interest,
Oh,
right.
principal.
And then
and
you've been
interest.
able, that got to $1,744,672 by inflating based on CPI, the number from 1994.
Actually, the law to apply CPI came in 2009.
Okay, so it
that was
stayed
an
the same
amendment
until
to the law.
2009.
Correct.
So from
Inflation.
94 to 2008.
Was
It
unchanged.
stayed the same, but then when they enacted the CPI increase, then it started moving its way
Correct.
up. Okay.
So you have absolutely no bonds outstanding against this repayment stream right now. Okay. So as I mentioned, the 2008s were paid off.
And these are, so this is 1,744,000 is bonds that we can take out, like, so like a working cash where we're not, it's being paid through taxes?
Through a debt service
Okay,
levy, which is not subject to the cap, like your ed fund, your O&M fund, transportation, all those are subject to the tax cap for operating. Your debt service extension-based bonds, with a limit of that $1,744,000, is a separate levy on top of that. And then your referendum bond debt service is a separate levy on top of that.
okay.
And the $1,700,000 is an annual debt service.
Right.
Yes.
It's not
So
the
if
debt
you went-
itself.
So if you went 20 years, you take that, multiply it by the $1,700,000. If you want a 10-year note payment, you take that by 10. 5 years, you take it by 5.
Right, and that would be the total debt service,
Debt.
principal and
Right,
interest, not
principal and
the-
interest, right, but you back into the principal portion of what you're borrowing off of current interest
Exactly.
rates, right?
Mhm.
Depending on how long of a maturity schedule you want to use.
Right.
And this is just a limit, as
Without referendum.
the page before was also a different limit,
Right.
independent of each other.
There's lots of different limits under the Illinois statutes.
So we have a limit, so far you've covered a limit of how much debt we could incur, and we have a limit of how much payments we can incur.
Right.
Without a referendum.
Without a-
So
Without referendum.
the cap on issuing the debt is an black letter law, kind of. We couldn't go and issue more than what's allowed on the prior page, right?
Right. The
So what-
6.9%
so the 10
is an
million-
overall debt limit.
Okay, so the net debt limit of $10,358,740 from page 4, that cannot be changed unless the assessments change or the outstanding principal change.
Right. As you pay down
Okay.
principal, that limit
That
goes up.
increases your-
Okay.
Mhm.
So it's almost like a credit card, as you're paying down, so you have a credit limit on your credit card. as you start paying that down, so say like you went to the max, as you start paying that down, then that frees up cash that you could charge against or use for credit, right?
Right, as you pay it down, you get more of that limit back. The other thing, if that EAV turns around and goes in the other direction, up, then that's going to provide additional bonding authority as well.
What happens if you experience what we experienced in 2007, where the market fell and then value started dropping? Does that have an effect on it too?
Yes, if the EAV declines in big jumps, we'll have additional reduction in your debt limit.
Okay.
So the debt limit, and I think it's important that our families know, is regulated by the state, by laws. Schools cannot just borrow ad hoc. Right. 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 Now, there are exceptions to the debt limits, but I won't get into all that unless we have a specific one, because there's exceptions.
Stay away from it.
Let's just stay with this, right?
Stay with what we're focused on.
Okay, so back on page 5, the 3 types of bonds that you can issue without referendum that are payable from this debt service extension base include working cash fund bonds, and they can be used either for capital or for operating. They require a petition period and a public hearing prior to issuance. Life safety bonds, so the requirement there is for the life safety amendments to be approved by your Cook County Intermediate Center, which took the place of the ROE, and by the state superintendent of schools. Okay, so I understand you're in that process now. It also requires a public hearing, which you're having tonight. And then funding bonds are used to refund any debt or lease obligations the district might have.
So you could use that for, if, say like we were in a bad economic period, we took out some loans or bonds which had a real high interest rate, to be, you can use that to refinance it to get, would that be a funding bond?
Well, the more typical way funding bonds are used, let's say if you had lease certificates, let's say you had, that are being paid from your operating fund, your O&M fund, for leasing equipment or facilities. That is a claim or a debt against the district. If you no longer want to pay it out of your operating funds, because you need your operating funds for other things, you could issue funding bonds and refund that obligation, and then it would be paid by the debt service extension base. So, limited bonds do not negatively impact the operating funds of the district. As we mentioned, that levy's outside of your operating funds. They are paid through the bond and interest tax levy or debt service tax levy up to the debt service extension base. And the best practice is to amortize these bonds quickly, so there's more authority for you should you have future needs. The maximum period of time that you can use to pay any bonds off, whether they're limited bonds or referendum-approved bonds, is 20 years. Okay, so here's the current situation. We looked at this before. You've got the debt base of $1,744,672. Then you've got your outstanding referendum debt service, which includes both that 06B and the 07A, which have payments of about $4.4 million a year. And then based on your EAV currently, that results in a tax rate of 58 cents for debt.
What does that mean, a tax rate of 58 cents?
Well, what's your total tax rate? $3, $4? Yeah, $3.70, something like that. So 68 cents of that $3.70 goes towards paying.
I can't remember having a public meeting, so what does it, I understand there's number, you said debt service tax rate on what, or?
The
It's
tax-
58 cents of,
per 100 of equalized assessed valuation.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, page 7. We did some financing options here to fund your life safety improvements that you're considering. And
The estimated cost we use in these examples is 7.6. I know you're authorizing 7.8 million because you don't have the approvals or the bids yet. You want to make sure you have enough authority. So as I believe Mr. Welch mentioned at the beginning, it's up to 7.8 million. It does not require you to issue all of it by any means. So the summer 2015 projects include funding from proposed 4 million of life safety bonds, and then summer of 16 and thereafter.
Can we advance, Mary Ann, can we advance the
It's
slide
a-
so it matches, it didn't match?
Sorry,
Option one.
page
Okay.
7, Mary.
Right, it did match.
Yeah, it did
Right.
match. We're talking about the narrative the page before.
Oh, I thought we were
Page
on
seven.
option one, I was looking, oh, I'm sorry.
No, you were
Sorry.
fine.
Okay, so
Oh, sorry.
2016, we're looking at issuing 3.6 million of life safety bonds. So you also have the ability, as I mentioned earlier, to refund the Series 2006 bonds. And the savings there is approximately $225,000 a year over the life of the bonds. The Series 2007 bonds will also provide savings at the call date if interest rates stay about the same as they are today. And for that, we're projecting savings of $275,000. So again, these are estimates based on interest rates today.
Are you projecting, is your firm projecting that interest rates will be stay the same on December 1st, 2017?
We don't project interest rates.
Well, if you looked up on a national database of published information, like the government, or anybody who predicts interest rates, are they predicting interest rates would be the same on December 1st, 2017?
I really don't know. I mean, we know that the Fed's going to raise rates, which is their short-term Fed funds rate, which just affects the short end of the curve in the fourth quarter of this year.
Well, if we're relying on you for the advice on this, and we're saying this, we need to know what people think the interest rates are gonna be to see whether it's a reasonable consideration that interest rates are expected to remain the same in 2017, which, what I read, that's not what people are predicting right now, right? So how do we?
As I mentioned, the Fed is looking at raising
Right.
rates, you know, we don't know. It will depend on how our economy does, how much and how often, and if at all.
Well, that always
So-
depends on that, but
Right.
you still, in order for us to be fully advised, and if we're gonna move forward with this, we need somebody with expertise to predict what they think the rates will be and how that would affect this idea of a 275,000 annual savings as of December 1st of 2017, don't we?
Well, I'm not sure who you're going to hire, who's going to tell you what rates are going to be in 2017, but, you know, what we're trying to do is show you that, you know, we have a good savings opportunity. We've shown you the history of interest rates. Interest rates have stayed low for an extended period of time beyond anyone's prediction.
Exactly.
So, you know, I think this is just good information for the board to know.
Well, let's say for an example, what if I looked, when I got home today, what's predicted, and they say the interest rates are gonna be, you know, equivalent to what you have here. These government bonds are gonna be, you know, 300 basis points higher, just for the sake of discussion.
Then we can rerun it at 300 basis points higher.
Okay, so how
You've
do-
got good direction on that. We're happy to, you
But-
know, run the numbers.
We lack the expertise amongst the board members, the administration, to decide that. We need somebody who has expertise to give us advice on what they predict, you know, what, even a range of what the, I think it's not a very good assumption today to assume interest rates are gonna be the same today, I mean, December 2017 as they are today. Would you agree with that?
Well, you know, I really don't know what they're going to be, but we're happy to show you up 50 basis points, up 100 basis points, and that would be just as much a shot.
Well,
in
I'm
the
going to tell
dark.
you, I struggle when we get these kind of presentations, having limited amount of finances. You know, businesses make these decisions based on what people predict and what they think the best alternative is. And I don't
Well, you
think
know, we can look
if
at
somebody came to our
Bloomberg and the-
CFO today and said, here's the thing, and if the interest rates are the same in December 2017, here's what it would be, I don't think the person would come back the next day if they're predicting, well, we don't know what it is and we can't tell you. Because that's what you're relying on people to give you the advice based on what the expectations are, right?
Right.
And again, nobody can predict what the interest rates are gonna be then, for sure.
So I got a couple observations. Number one, we're talking about 2017, we're talking about the second series of bonds, which are currently not callable right now, which potentially has a negative arbitrage. So the bigger question probably is, at what point do interest rates go higher where the trade-off between financing it this year with a negative arbitrage opportunity, what kind of jump in interest rates would it motivate the board to make a decision to pull the financing more current?
Right.
And lock in the current interest rate is probably the better question.
That is a very good question, and I've made presentations to the administration on exactly that before. The direction I was given tonight was really to focus on life safety bond options, so we can look at those break-even interest rates and options on the 2017 bonds, at a different time. So this is just, an estimate based on today. One thing I will tell you that also affects the savings is the shape of the yield curve. So the yield curve has these very low short-term interest rates. So when we get to 2017, which is 2 years away, if the shape of the yield curve is relatively the same, we're going to have savings simply because we're now, instead of at year 2, we're at year 1, okay? So if the shape is relatively the same, we're going to have savings on the 2017 refunding. What those savings are, I cannot predict interest rates in 2017. So the purpose of our presentation tonight is to look at savings opportunities in the future. We can get into more analysis when we get more close to the consideration of that, but my direction was to focus on life safety options.
Well, again, people can slap me, or Mike, the new president, could. I keep hearing what you were asked to do, but I struggle with getting presentations like this and saying, here's what it is today. I don't know what it's gonna be then, but we're showing that it's a reality based on the presentation, which is how we make our decision. So I always struggle with, we hire you for your expertise, and if somebody tells you that, don't you turn around and say, well, you need to know interest rates are probably going to change or whatever, as opposed to, this is what I asked for, this is what they gave me, because we want to make the right decision with the right information to the best we can. And I feel like we're a little at a disadvantage with this information, because we're making an assumption that doesn't seem very realistic, and that's that interest rates are going to be the same a year and a half from now.
Tim, one of the things is, we met with the advisory council, Gary, myself, and Kevin, and in the discussion of life safety bonds and how we might go forward doing it, we also wanted to give the board a flavor of a potential savings. And it's not going to exact science of what that potential savings is, but 18 months ago, we were talking about refinancing these bonds. And if we do that, it's going to be a monthly savings or a yearly savings.
Right.
And it's possible that some of these life safety bonds would be paid for with that savings.
Right.
And you're right, we can't predict exactly if it's going to be a dollar for dollar savings or not, if it's going to be up or down. So we asked her to prepare this presentation and just take an interest rate and go with it as an idea.
Okay.
It's not a decision we're going to make tonight, but it's something that we need to get in front of the board as we move down the road to, when it becomes time to, if we're going to issue the life safety bonds, if we're going to refinance the series 2006 or 2007. But it's kind of, we're broader here for the life safety bonds because that's our immediate need.
Okay.
With the thought process that we want to have minimal impact on the taxpayers by issuing this new debt.
I
So we
understand.
then said, let's then supplementally look at the savings on refining both series.
But-
One we can immediately do coming out of the same levy year. The second series we can't do in the same levy year.
Okay.
Unless we actually analyze the
Unless we do this
arbitrage.
negative arbitrage, then analyze where we think interest rates, and at which point there's a crossover. But we didn't want to get into that discussion this early in the game, because it's,
But we also didn't think it would be fair to just say life safety, life safety, life safety without giving you this up front to say, here's something that might offset that. We can't tell you exactly where it is or where it's gonna go, but here's a first taste of it. And sure, when we gotta get more specific numbers, we'll ask the experts for more specific numbers or direct the administration
Or a
to get
range
us
of
there.
estimates where we think interest rates, and if we want to plug a model in that says we think it's going to be higher and put it in and see if it makes sense to bring that refi up earlier.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mike.
Well, and I think too, if we're hearing from council that we hire, that it's best practice to not tell us what an interest rate's gonna be in 2 years. And we're being told that there are several factors beyond anyone's control. I think we need to take that into consideration, because we sit at this table and we had the same conversation with our architect saying, but you said the cost would be. And so I think we need to hear that very clearly, that here's the history, here's the slope, but there are many factors that could change that. If we have a major world incident, or if the feds make a major change that nobody has control over, all of that could change instantly, and nobody could predict that.
And this is ridiculously obvious, but Liz, humor me. When I read this, I said to myself, all right, at the end of 2015, the chances are the savings are going to be pretty close to what is here. 2017, like Tim said, I'm reading all kinds of stuff. You can't predict. Listen, if I could predict what was going to happen, I wouldn't be sitting here. I'd be living on an island that I own. So, I mean, isn't that the takeaway?
That's absolutely
All
right.
right.
And if a world event happened, our 5% 2007 bonds might look good.
What's good about it, though, is we as a board know that you got 2 series of bonds. The first one you can predict pretty fast if you want to look for savings-wise. The second one is something that's going to take a little bit more analysis. And coming back to the expert like you and saying, okay, yeah, if you do it this time, this is what your risks are, or this is what, and you're going to provide a recommendation, this is what we think it's going to be. But it's, like you said, it's not that time right now to look at it, but just like Gary, what you said, let's look at the savings and see what we can do with life safety and all that.
And so we're here for the life safety portion of the public hearing, and if we can ask Liz to just carry on and try to get through her information.
I want to make one comment. I mean, I think what Tim's trying to get to is the best prediction is basically this yield curve. And I think it'd be helpful if you just explain, that's why I wanted you to go into this. What does this yield curve mean? It's basically a prediction of what the price of money is going to be 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, 4 years, which is the interest rate, right?
Right.
Well, then you should explain that.
I think she did.
No, she didn't.
Well,
But it doesn't predict the interest
it's-
rate a
it's
year from now.
expectation.
It's the best guess of
Those
the
are-
market.
those
No, it doesn't.
are
That's just
historic,
saying
just
that is
history,
the
right.
interest, that's typically what a yield curve. But we don't know, inflation's been, CPI's 0.8. We don't know where inflation's going to be, at which point then your latter part of your curve is going to go much wider gap. The part of the risk, what you have between a 5-year note and a 30-year note is built-in credit risk and inflation risk. Inflation. So if
Right.
inflation starts turning around, that 30-year, 20-year is gonna be a much higher percentage rate. We
Right.
can't predict that.
Well, I know, but all I'm saying is the market, this is already priced out. The best guess of the interest rate, the market already
As
says
of
that.
today.
As of today, right.
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 Not 2 years from now.
Just so everybody's clear, the public hearing's on the life safety
Right.
plan and the life safety work, so we brought Liz here to say, okay, in the event the district chooses somewhere down the line to take out life safety bonds to address these items, what do those costs and options look like? And how can we offset that impact on the district and the taxpayers by the refinancing? We did not ask her to go in depth on the refinancing. That would happen at a later date if the board so chooses to go the life safety route option. I think that's why she's kind of saying I wasn't prepared for that, because that wasn't the direction we gave her. So I'm not, it was just supposed to focus on the life safety for the purpose of the hearing.
Well, I think Tim's point was just cautionary. In other words, don't count on the 250 or the 275 or the 225.
Sure.
Right, but I think we're highlighting for our community that that's almost $500,000 that could plausibly be saved, which could then be plausibly used towards life safety. If all things held constant, that would be basically free money in our pocket.
Savings to the
That's
taxpayers.
the only point.
Yep,
Yes.
for sure. So,
Page 8.
thanks. Okay, so options 1, 2, and 3 look at just 4 million of life safety bonds issued in a short order this summer to provide funding for your projects. And option 1 looks at a 5-year repayment. Okay, so if we go to the 6th column from the left, we look at payments of around $855,000 a year over 5 years. This assumes the Moody's AAA or AA3 rating and interest rates as of May 5th. And your all-in true estimated interest cost is 2.03%. And you can see how these payments of around $850,000 reduce the debt service remaining capacity in the green box. We add reduce the total debt service by projected savings just on the 2006 bonds, which again, the call date's coming up this fall. We can refund them as soon as September, before the call date, to bring the net payments up 8 cents. So I see this is kind of falling off the page on this copy, but it's $50
On a
on a
250.
$250,000 market value home,
More than they would pay.
more.
But, so, and this one here, so let me just, so people are watching. We are refinancing the 2006 bonds, taking the $4 million life safety, but all at lower rates, but at the life safety, you're keeping the value of the 2006 bond, but life safety, you're only taking it over 5 years, which shortens, which lowers that interest rate even more than what we're paying on the 2006 refinance, right?
So, and the formula for how you get to that is at the bottom. And,
And that $50 extra would be only paid for those that 5-year
it's
period?
5 years,
Okay.
right. So I'm looking at the increase, and then that would be for 5 years. And the line below shows the repayment in, after 2019.
So, I want to make sure. Go on.
So bigger question to us is, you're proposing the 4 million, yet we talked about 7.9 million in life safety. And again, this talks to us about possibly taking the whole interest rate concept there, whether we should take should we go out now with the current interest rate, what we know, and go with the full 7.8? Or do we wait, I see you're gonna come down the road with a proposal that says in 2 parts.
Right.
Right, and I'll let you continue that, but I think that's a bigger question for us. Take advantage of what we know now in interest rates, right?
Mm-hmm.
And look at it that way.
Right, because if you do 4 million now for your projects this summer, and then 3.6 for your projects next summer.
And if we wait, we have potential risk of interest rates.
You have
on
the risk of
3 point-
interest rates going up, but you have the savings on that 3.6 million not paying interest on it for a year.
Right, and that's a trade-off of
That's the
how big of
trade-off.
a jump in interest rates.
A year or two.
Or 2, right, depending on when you want to do it. So in this interest rate environment that we've been in, and I know everyone's looking at rates perhaps going up in the future, but in this low interest rate environment, it is better to issue bonds closer to the time you're going to spend the money. Because, number one, by holding on to the funds for a year, the interest earnings on the short end of the yield curve, as we saw, are very, very low. Yet you're paying a 5, 7, or 10-year rate on the funds you're borrowing. So based on this interest rate environment, it's better to borrow the money closer to the time you're going to spend it.
Okay, people throw out these EAVs and all that, and I want to make sure I understand it. So we currently have a 58.58 debt rate, right?
Yes.
according to the third to last column. And we go up under this scenario to 0.66, which is a 0.08 increase. You're saying there's a $50 impact in a $250,000 house. That's the easy part. The hard part is how you get there, and you have to read the bottom note, right?
Right.
So how, but if I take 250,000, 100 EAV, that, per 100 EAV, that's 2,500, right? In EAV that you're assessing,
10%,
right?
yeah.
Times the Cook County multiplier of 2.6621, what do I multiply by 2.6621?
The 250,000 times 10% times the 2.6621.
And less the 6,000.
Yeah. Times 0.08
Okay.
divided by 100.
It wouldn't hurt to put that kind of example in here so that it's easier to understand how you got to the $50. If you don't mind. I mean, I could figure, I just wanted to know because I
Yeah.
could not figure it out from what was here. Okay.
Now, Liz, let me ask you something else. So, $250,000 home, if the EAV increases every year on that $250,000 on the value, does that lower the payment, or does that keep the payment the same, or?
Well, it depends what's happening on the whole tax base overall.
Okay.
But let's say the 8 cents is about the same,
Okay.
and the value of the home goes up, the payments will go up.
Okay.
If the value goes up in relation to the other homes, if all the values go up on all the homes the same amount, the payment will
Then the
pro
rate
rata
goes
be the
down.
the rate goes down, right?
And the payment stays the same.
Okay.
Good point.
Okay.
So that's the first option.
First option,
Is 5 years?
5 years.
Okay.
Page 9 looks at the blue bars.
Can I ask one other question on this? Because I'm still, I understood now your explanation how you get the remaining debt capacity. But now I don't understand because we have, if you just look at the first line, we have currently 4.4 million, right? That we're paying the
Yes.
debt service?
Yes.
I'm missing how the 1.7 that you said was from before. And that you said when we issued the bonds the last time we stayed within that, how does that relate to the fact we have 4.4, which is like 3 times that amount?
Yeah, the 4.4 is associated with the bonds that were approved by referendum.
So they were referendum, they don't have to fit into that?
That's right.
Okay. Got it. Thank you.
So we want to skip to page 10 then?
Yep. Page 10 is that 4 million now repaid over 7 years as opposed to 5 years. So the payments are lower, about $625 a year. So the offset is, again, the same projected refunding savings fall of 2015. So a 5-cent tax rate occurs, but it stays out for longer, now 7 years, and the increase is 32. And
So
that's on
about
the $250,000 home.
.05 increase, or about $32 a year for 7 years on the taxpayer.
Right. Okay. Then let's go to option 3 on page 12, 10 years. So the payments are down to $464,000, but now they're outstanding for 10 years. You can see the interest rate goes up. The longer we go out, it's 2.59% in this case. But the increase is almost offset. It's only 3 cents on the, when you consider the refunding savings.
What's the dollar amount? Because it got cut off on my
They
chart.
get cut out.
I got cut off.
$19.
Thank you.
So if we went out 10 years, $19 on a year for 10 years on an average taxpayer.
For 250.
250 home.
Mhm.
So on a 5-year, taxpayer's gonna pay $250, on a 7-year, it's $224, and on a 10-year, $190 cumulative, if you look at it, right?
Correct. Mhm.
So even though we're potentially paying a higher interest rate, the taxpayer's actually winding up paying a little less because of the savings
Kind of.
generated from the refi coming through. Is that the, I would have thought
Well-
we've basically been pretty similar if you think of it, with the higher interest rate.
You know, it's just netting the two against each other. The longer you go, the lower the payment.
Right, but you would think the overall, right, cumulative,
Cumulative would be lower
but
because of
19
your.
times
having-
10, 32 times 7, and 5 times 50, 250, 224, and 190. So, all right, so they're all about the same area. All right.
So then the second set of options, 1A, 2A, and 3A, look at 7.6 million in total, which tries to address all of your life safety needs in two issues. One issued this summer, and the next one issued the following January, actually, to address the projects that you would complete the following summer. So in this case, we've also added in the savings from the 2007 bonds, which is, you know, has been pointed out is 2 years away. Interest rates could be different, so that average annual 275,000 savings could be less. So if we start on the left side, we've got the 4 million life safety and the 3.6 million. So those add up to a total of about $1,617,000 a year for 5 years. That takes the tax rate up 18 cents initially, which is $111. Again, I apologize, it fell off this page here. And then when we blend in the savings, potential savings from the 2007 refunding in 2017, that reduces the tax rate by another 4 cents. So the net increase at that point is $88 from what is being currently paid.
So 2 years, $111 increase, and then the final 3 years, it's only an $88.
Right, and then it goes away after that because it's a 5-year repayment altogether.
Okay.
Okay?
What does the BQ stand for again?
BQ is for bank qualified, and that has to do with issuing $10 million or less in any calendar year. If you do that, you're considered a small issuer, and bank investors are allowed an extra tax deduction from the federal government, and they pass that on to the issuers in terms of lower interest rates. And so for bonds in the first 5 years or so, that's worth 0.05% on the interest rate generally. The first issue that we're suggesting for the summer, to get going on your projects, we've assumed not BQ because we're hoping that rates stay low and you're able to refund those 2006 bonds in the fall. So that would then be in calendar year 2015, so we don't want to, we have to stay within 10 million. And the 2006 bonds would be about 12 million refunded. So that puts us over the bank qualified limit. But when we have the opportunity to do so, we like to keep it within that 10 million and get the district the extra 5 or 10 basis points as the case may be.
Thank you.
Okay, so 1A is a 5-year repayment, so you see the dollars there, and the graph shows how those two pieces fit together, and then the green bars are the referendum approved. Option 2A on page 16 looks at the 7-year repayment. So we're just taking both pieces, repaying it over 7 years. Annual payments of about $1,190,000, offset by the savings of the 06 bonds and potential 07. We've got a net 13-cent increase to start, which is $76 on the $250,000 home. And then if and when the 2007 bond refunding savings kick in, that reduces it by 4 cents again to 9 cents.
For 50,
For $54. There's a graphic on page 17. And then 3A is if you go 10 years with the 4 million and the 3.6 million. Gives you average annual payments of about $875,000 a year, and it's an 8-cent increase, like $51, and then it drops 3 cents to
29.
29. So obviously, there's lots of combinations and different things that you could do with regard to this repayment. Back to the theme, the limited bonds, you know, you want to pay them off quickly so you have authority left over. You want to try to match the amortization of the bonds to the average life of the improvements you're making. And I think it's fair to say that some of these life safety improvements would certainly last more than 10 years, hopefully. So I think
When you
these
said
are-
you want to match, you don't want to exceed, right? Or do you really want to match it?
You don't want to exceed.
Okay.
Thank you.
And our rating right now, given our financial status right now is,
Double A3, big A, little A3. The very top rating is triple A. Right below that is big A, little A1, then big A, little A2, and then big A, little A3, which is where you are. Below that, there's A1, A2, A3, then you get into the B double A1s and so on and so forth.
is there any way that our rating can go up?
Well, I would say the challenges facing the state of Illinois make it difficult. However, you know, so there's that downward pressure, but, you know.
But the rating is at the time placing the bond, right?
The rating would occur once you determine to issue the bond, right?
I mean, subsequent rate increases, we've already locked into an interest rate, and we're already debt servicing it. So, I
Yes.
mean, and the likelihood of within the next 7 months, significant change in our, is minimal, isn't it, based on the current situation we got facing?
That's
us?
another thing we cannot predict.
Right,
The
right,
state of
exactly.
Illinois. But,
Who predicts that for us? Seems like we need somebody else here when we get into
That's
this. Seriously. I'm asking a serious question. Before we make these decisions, we need people who can provide this information. Who would you ask?
Well, the legislation reports that we've been getting from the state, you know, they keep talking about freezing property taxes. If that were to pass, that could significantly change all of this.
I realize that, but,
But
so we're on the same page. Who do you get to provide that guidance to you if it's something you don't do?
well, you really have to talk to your local legislature.
No, not predicting what the legislature's going to do, predicting what your bond rating's going to be, or whether it's going to go up or down.
Right. Well, we can give you guidance on that.
Oh, you can do that?
Yes, we
Oh,
can do
I thought you
that.
just said you couldn't.
I can't predict the
What are
state
we
of
doing
Illinois.
though, Kevin?
Tonight,
We stay on track.
All right.
so we stay on track. The purpose of tonight was to say to the public, we have $7.8 million roughly of life safety items that are applicable to life safety funds. And we brought in William Blair to give a public presentation so the public body can see the impact on the taxpayer if we took out life safety bonds.
And we're not.
We're not voting on any bonds.
Bonds, any
Right.
loans, anything.
And by conducting this hearing, we are not required to do any life safety bonds. In the event the board so chooses at a future date to do life safety bonds, we have met our requirement of a public hearing.
What-
I have a request. Next time, before we vote on this, I want you to modify this graph so we have the net savings from the refunding. Right now, it's 4.4 total, right? That's what we'd be paying. So I think it'd be useful just to be able to see that,
What graph are you talking about?
any of them. There should be a little dot, a blank space here that says this is the refunded portion. So in other words,
Okay.
total payment here. That way you can see, okay, we're saving this, we're spending this, but we're saving that. It's just a very simple little
Sure.
thing,
Yeah.
but I think it would
No
help
problem.
everyone
When we get
understand
to the
this
point in
better.
time where we're gonna actually vote on either
Yes.
life safety or refinancing, which won't be tonight,
Yeah.
we can get that information.
Well, I know some people seem a little frustrated, but two things. The public wants to know we understand this. So this is the presentation. You chose to do it in this hearing. I'd like to make sure, as much as I can understand it. I want to make sure if somebody asks me, I can say we have the right information,
or we can get the right information when we decide it, because if we come 6 months from now, and now people say it's time to do it, and we ask questions, it's like, you have to ask somebody else, we got a problem on our hands, right? So that's why I asked the questions, to make sure I understand, and if somebody asks me, I can explain it.
I think the questions were good.
The last thing I want to know is, what about the cost? Are the cost for the finances included in these numbers? And,
Yes.
you know, what, does it matter, won't the cost kind of double if we do two? The closing costs will be twice as much if we do two financings instead of one, almost, won't they?
Well, a lot of the costs are variable with the par amount of the bond you're issuing.
Okay.
So it is better if we can do them all together, because there is a fixed portion of the cost too, which are mostly related to getting the bond rating.
Mm-hmm.
But, for example, our fee slides 1-to-1 with the size of the bond. So whether you do 2 or 1 or 5 bond issues, our fee is the same. Bond counsel also has scalability with the par amount of the bonds. The issue, and this kind of brings us to the proposed financing schedule, is that you've got some life safety work that I believe you're contemplating on doing this summer.
We are, yes.
All right, so one thing with life safety financing, you cannot spend your own money and then reimburse yourself with the proceeds from a life safety bond.
Okay.
If you could, our recommendation would probably be, let's wait until the fall, issue the life safety bonds at the same time as the refunding bonds, and do it that way.
Okay.
Right? But there's this problem where if you spend your own money, the life safety amendments do not justify.
Okay.
So that's why we've got two issues.
Okay.
So in other words, we can't really wait until 2017 to issue bonds if we're already starting to spend the money like in 2016.
Right.
So is there a way to like buy an option of some type, so we're like an insurance, type of insurance policy, so we can assume the interest rate is going to stay at a certain rate?
There are some things you can do with regard to that. The most common is called a forward rate lock. Typically, you will pay an extra 5 basis points or 0.05% on your interest rate for every month that you lock ahead of the time when you're going to issue. So if you're going to issue at 6 months, if you're going to close at 6 months ahead, but you want to lock in rates today, that's 0.05 times 6, so that's 30 basis points more on the interest rate that you're going to pay to lock it in, right? But that might be a good decision, and we can do analysis on that if we think interest rates are really going to go up more than 30 basis points in 6 months.
Well, that's something these guys can look into.
Yeah. So that's your best option if you get to that point.
Then I have a question for the finance council. What kind of timeline are we?
If you look at the last page,
Last page of our proposal is page 20.
Right.
So if we go to page 20, it shows some of the steps that the board's taken already with regard to submitting the life safety approvals, publishing the notices for the bond hearing that we're having tonight, as well as the concrete asphalt life safety repairs hearing, which you're going to have later tonight. Then the thing that we cannot do is issue bonds until, for certain life safety amendments, till we get those back from Springfield. So as we look at this schedule, we are looking at discussion and approving the remaining life safety amendments on the 26th, and then architects submitting the remaining life safety amendments after that. Then we're looking at a parameters life safety bond resolution, and also looking at the refunding in July. For July 14th, your regular meeting. Now, we can't issue or can't approve the life safety bond resolution until we receive the life safety amendments from both the RO8 and from the State Board of Education. Okay? So if for some reason it gets hung up in Springfield and we're not ready for the July 14th meeting, we'll move to the next meeting, or we can always call a special meeting.
Is it pretty perfunctory for them, or do you find that they get hung up, or?
Well, it's really more the architect to comment on that. I mean, the thing is, you just did your life safety survey, and you submitted it, right? And
Yes.
the state approved that.
Yes.
Right.
So it seems to me that the amendments that come forth from that study should also be approved.
That's why we broke up the amendments too, to prioritize them, the ones that had more of an immediate impact in the event we need them, like the items related to the current project. And the second amendment tonight has some current and some roofs that need to be done in the next few years. So that we put some gaps in there so that as we send them into the state, they're not approving 3 amendments with 20-something items. We're short stacking them.
So assuming we get the life safety approvals back before July 14th, we're able to approve the life safety bond resolution and I put the parameters refunding bond resolution and escrow resolution on here to give us flexibility to price the bonds, the refunding bonds at the most opportune time. We would see moving ahead immediately with the pricing of the life safety bonds after that meeting and closing that issue by July 24th, so you have your funds and you're able to pay the bills for this summer's work.
Wonderful. Thank you. Thanks for that
Very
explanation.
good job, very good.
Appreciate it.
That concludes the presentation. Does the board have any other additional comments? Seeing none, no written testimony concerning the proposed issuance of bonds was received. The meeting will now be open for public discussion, and all persons desiring to be heard will be heard at this time. The Board of Education welcomes and encourages the participation of its citizens in the business of the school district. There are 2 points in the meeting where visitor statements are scheduled. Citizens are welcome to raise questions or make comments at either one. Comments will be limited to 3 minutes per individual and cannot be combined. A signal will be given with 30 seconds remaining. Please note, the Board of Education will not answer questions or engage in dialogue during visitor comments. If a person would like additional time to address the board, such a request should be submitted in writing 48 hours before the meeting to the superintendent. For more details, please refer to Board Policy 2:230, Public Participation at Board of Education Meetings. Can I then get would anyone like to speak on this side of the room? And would anyone like to speak?
Somebody's coming.
You would? Would you please just come up, have a seat, state your name, and give you the general town you live in?
My name is Mark McKillenick. I live in Rockefeller Ave over here in Brookfield.
Okay.
The question that I have is, how do I go about getting a 5-year or 10-year plan that the school has in place for where they see spending the money, the taxpayers' money? Because we just got involved with spending $8.9 million, a grant for $8.9 million that was spent on a football stadium and a football field, and that's been approved for $9.4 million beyond what was originally proposed for that. Now we're saying there's another $7.8 million that we want to spend on life safety. I'd like to know what our long-term plan is for these items, because if we just said we're going to do a football field and a stadium, and we want to do a parking lot too, and then a couple weeks later, we say, well, now we've got something else, another million, what's coming next? And I'd like to know how the citizens of our towns can get that information to know what we are looking at as we come to these decisions, if there's a referendum, and what our next, steps are with the spending of the school.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you. So how could I get that information?
My best suggestion is you leave your name and address with the board secretary, and
Okay,
information can be funneled back to you.
all right, thank you.
Anyone else on this side? Anyone on this side? Seeing none, can I get a motion to close the hearing for this portion on page 6?
So moved.
Can you read it? Can someone read the motion on page 6?
Okay. I'm sorry, I haven't done this in a long time. Resolved that the Board of Education, Township High School District, 208, Cook County, Illinois, hereby declares that the public hearing concerning the proposal to sell $7.8 million in school fire prevention and safety bonds be adjourned.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Second by Gary Gritchen. Can you call the roll, please?
Mr. Gritchen?
Yes.
Ms. Ruska?
Yes.
Mr. Jefferson?
Yes.
Dr. King?
Yes.
Yes.
Mr. Walsh?
Yes.
Mr. Rogers?
Yes.